So thank you everyone for joining our webinar on rental property insurance. I'm Cassia, the head of landlord education at Rentalutions. We're excited to have two experts from State Farm with us today. Sherry Parker is a State Farm property and casualty underwriting consultant, and Heather Paul is a public affairs specialist at State Farm. I'm going to hand it over to Sherry, who's going to explain exactly what we're going to cover today.
Thank you, Cassia. Today we'll be discussing the insurance needs you have as a person who owns properties which you lease to renters. We'll not be addressing the needs of someone who may be acting as your property manager or someone who helps you rent out units of your property. But we'll talk about the benefits of having this type of coverage, as well as the importance of ensuring tenants have their own renters coverage. We'll also let you know what's covered and what may not be covered by these policies. Throughout the webinar, you'll be able to ask questions, which we'll be able to address at the end. Heather, can you please share a bit about State Farm and our relationship with Rentalutions?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sherry. Many of you may recognize our slogan, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. But for us, it's more than a tagline. It's how we conduct our business every day. Yeah, as the largest provider of auto and homeowners insurance in the United States, we understand the challenges faced daily by our customers. That's why our mission is to help people manage the risks of everyday life, recover from the unexpected, and realize their dreams. The very definition of entrepreneurial spirit. As the leader in a competitive industry, insuring more customers than anyone else, and with more than 18,000 State Farm agents, we are uniquely qualified to help more people with more solutions for their lives. Being innovative is also integral when it comes to improving the customer experience, whether it's providing access to technology or finding solutions to help customers with efficiency. Developing strong relationships will help us to continue to meet the changing needs of you, our customers. As a company, we value entrepreneurship, and in fact, our State Farm agents themselves are small business owners. Many of them are even landlords. So they certainly recognize the importance of financial planning and time management. Over 2.5 years ago, State Farm realized we could not do this alone, and we found a wonderful partner in innovation, Rentalutions. Rentalutions is able to help small business rental property owners find those solutions to property management with valuable online tools that you'll hear about shortly. For property owners as well as tenants, the rental process can be very complex and time-consuming, especially for part-time property owners. Historically, small business property owners haven't had access to the same tools and resources as those big real estate investors. So our collaboration with Rentalution allows State Farm to help find those solutions to rental property owners. And as a result of this collaborative relationship, we have been the exclusive insurer of choice for Rentalutions, and we are very excited to continue to help our customers as well as to help Rentalutions grow in the unique service they provide. Cassia, can you tell us a little more about some of the tools that Rentalution provides to rental property owners?
Awesome, thanks Heather. So as some of you already know, at Rentalutions, we provide software and resources that help landlords manage their rental properties. More than 40,000 do-it-yourself landlords use our platform to find, screen, and keep great tenants. Most of these landlords have less than 10 rental units, but we have some owners with as many as 200. As part of our mission to make renting easy, we developed a relationship with State Farm. State Farm is the largest P&C insurance company in the US. As Heather mentioned already, they have more than 18,000 agents across the country who understand these unique challenges of independent do-it-yourself landlords. This means that State Farm shares our goal of helping rental property owners like you find the best solutions possible. So speaking of these solutions, I'm going to hand it back over to Sherry, who's going to dive into what kind of coverage you might need.
Thanks, Cassia. So really, it's all about why you need a specific kind of insurance for a rental property. It's about your investment. And we at State Farm recognize that you have a lot invested in your rental property, and not just your money, but also your time. And since an ordinary condo unit owner's or homeowner's policy won't really cover your needs, you should consider the specific protection of a rental property insurance. Our policy is created to protect your property, provide protection against liability claims, and even provide lost rental income if your property is too damaged to rent due to a covered loss. And we'll go a little bit deeper into each one of these different items. Before we get there, why not a homeowner's policy? Well, the biggest difference is who the coverage is designed for. A homeowner's policy provides coverage for owner-occupied single-family or condo units, not homes or condo units rented out 100% to others, really for those owner-occupied homes. So let's talk a little bit about what the rental dwelling policy covers. In general, in the industry and at State Farm, the rental dwelling policy covers accidental direct physical loss to your rental dwelling and your personal property located there, based upon the coverage options selected for your policy. Dwelling coverage pays for covered repairs or reconstruction of the dwelling and other structures on the same property. For example, a pipe bursts and gets water all over the floors and causes damages to walls and cabinets. That would be an example of damage covered under the dwelling coverage. Personal property coverage pays for covered losses to your property while located at your rental dwelling. This includes furniture and other personal property rented with or used to maintain the property, like your lawnmower. It does not include any property belonging to your renter, and we'll get more into that in a bit. Loss of rents coverage is there to reimburse you for fair rental value lost if your rental dwelling is damaged by an insured loss causing that property to be uninhabitable, so your tenant can no longer live there and you can't rent it out. For example, a fire starting in the kitchen that spreads. Loss of rents, as well as coverage for the damage to the building, are two things that could be covered under the rental dwelling policy. And then finally, liability coverage protects you financially against costly liability lawsuits. Think about the legal issues you can get pulled into as a rental property owner. For example, a visitor to the property trips and falls while walking up the front steps of the house that you own. So then what's not covered? Here's an example. And while the State Farm dwelling policy and also the industry has pretty broad coverage, it does not provide coverage for every type of loss. Examples of some losses not insured include, but aren't limited to, for example, damage caused by continued or repeated seepage or leakage of water or steam. For example, a pipe under your kitchen sink that leaks and leaks and leaks under that sink, causing damage over a period of time to the cabinet and the flooring below. Or water damage that's caused by flooding or underground water. Earth movement, including earthquakes and landslides or mudslides. Damage caused by settling or contamination. And damage caused by rodents, insects such as bees or ants, or domestic animals, including the tenant's dog or cat or snake or whatever they might have. Here at State Farm, we have a unique policy for rental property owners of single-family homes and duplexes. We have a slightly different policy for someone renting out their condo unit, and still another policy for an apartment complex with multiple units, more than 2 or 4 in some states. One of our State Farm agents that Heather mentioned would really be able to help you determine which policy and coverages would best meet your needs. But there's some other things you also need to think about as a property owner, what you might need for protection. Depending on where your property is located, you might want to consider flood coverage through the National Flood Insurance Program through FEMA, or earthquake coverage. And finally, you might want to consider an umbrella policy. This type of policy provides a higher limit of liability coverage, and even though your rental dwelling policy provides liability coverage, it may not be enough in certain circumstances. State Farm personal and commercial liability products, umbrella products, can provide additional coverage you may need. So you might be thinking, all right, so what's all this going to cost? What does it typically cost, and what are the factors that impact those costs? Well, the cost of the policy is highly dependent on your particular situation, the state you live in, the property characteristics, and this again is where a State Farm agent comes in to provide assistance. State Farm agents are experts at helping our customers with finding just the right amount, or I should say not the right amount, but the right combination of coverages you might need. You can locate a State Farm agent at statefarm.com or out there on our mobile app, which you can see an example of on the screen. So I talked a little bit earlier on about your tenants. So let's talk a little bit more about them, and why you really should, as a rental property owner, encourage or require your tenants to have renter's insurance. The primary reason, your policy does not cover your renter's stuff. They need to have their own policy to cover their furniture, their clothing, their electronics, their liability, etc. They can insure thousands of dollars of personal property for less than $1 a day, and with some discounts available to keep costs within their budget. Again, an agent can help them discover all the possible discounts and help them figure out what type of renter's policy can best meet their personal needs. This is important for their protection and is something to consider requiring regardless of if they sign a lease with you or you have a month-to-month agreement with them. The policy can also help them cover legal defense costs if their visitor accidentally gets hurt at their place and takes them to court and not just you. And this is even more important if they have pets, which can injure a visitor to the property. I really hope this short overview has been helpful. I'm going to turn this back over to Heather at this point.
Thanks, Sherry. That is so much great and valuable information. We certainly understand that insurance is very complicated. There's a lot of components to it, and webinars like this are a critical piece of the education that we can provide to help navigate through the confusing world of insurance. This is a wonderful opportunity to go ahead and address any questions. So Cassia, can you explain what the next steps are?
Yeah, thank you, Heather. So we're going to pause briefly now while we collect your questions. You can feel free to type in any questions at this point, and then we'll start again in about 30 seconds with the Q&A. Awesome. We'll go ahead and start the Q&A now, and Heather and Sherry are going to jump in and answer these as we go. So the first question, is it a legal requirement to have rental property insurance?
That's a great question, Cassia, thanks. So while there are no legal requirements to have this type of coverage, you might want to be aware that if you have a mortgage on your property, your lender may require you to have coverage for the building, and then this would be the appropriate coverage to have.
Awesome, that makes sense. Can you pay for insurance monthly or annually, and do policies automatically renew each year?
Well, I'm going to talk about that second question first. So one thing about the insurance policy is you don't have to reapply every year. It will continue to renew. And the payment question is, at least I can answer for State Farm specifically. There are several payment options that we offer, including monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, and annually. You can even use your credit card to make your payment.
Awesome. And once you have a policy, is that price subject to change year to year?
It may, and again, I'll speak to it from a State Farm perspective. So at State Farm, we have a feature that allows your policy coverage for your building to increase with the cost of rebuilding, which is important. Should you have a total loss, you want to be able to rebuild with what you had there before. In addition to that, we also look at each state's experience and determine if our rates need to be increased or decreased, and we do both, depending on the experience in that state and what's going on.
And Sherry, that's an important piece for both rental property owners as well as tenants to understand. Having a conversation, at least on a yearly basis, whether it's on the phone or in person with a State Farm agent or your insurance agent, is a critical piece to being a responsible insurance policyholder. There are changes that occur all the time, whether it's changes in state insurance regulations, changes in the things that you own, changes in construction or rehabilitation of your property. All of those will go into changes in the pricing of your policy, as well as exclusions or exceptions to your policy.
Awesome. So this next question, when you buy additional coverage such as, say, flood insurance, do you have to pay separately, or is that all lumped together in one insurance payment?
That's a good question as well. So, and I'd mentioned the flood and insurance and earthquake coverage when we were talking earlier. And it really depends on what coverage you're going to be seeking. So flood insurance definitely is a separate policy, not connected directly to your rental dwelling policy. However, in most states, California being the exception for State Farm at least, earthquake coverage can be added by an endorsement. So it's just an add-on option that you can add to your base policy.
Cool. And then this next question, if you have the right coverage and a disaster happens, like a hurricane, what are the next steps?
Yeah, that's a great question, given all that's happening these days. Even a situation that impacts just your property can be so impactful to you as a rental property owner, and the same steps would occur. You need to take steps to protect your property from further damage, and then contact State Farm. And during those times, there are so many different options of ways that you can reach out to us. So you can reach out through your local agent. You can contact them. We have a toll-free number. Our State Farm mobile app is another option to report a claim, or statefarm.com. So we have different options that can be suited for any number of different types of customers.
And Sherry, that's a good time also to remind people to go on to statefarm.com and register. That allows them to quickly access their policy information, their agent's information. There's also information on they call this Simple Insights on statefarm.com that can provide you with educational materials on understanding what to do before, during, and after a catastrophe or a weather-related event. There's great information on there from everything from dog bite prevention to fire safety to things about rental property and understanding the importance of rental insurance and insurance in general.
Awesome. So we have somebody in the audience who wants us to speak more to loss of rental income insurance. They say they've heard of it, but they want to know more about it.
Okay. So think about this. So you have your rental property and you have tenants in your property, and you're collecting rent from them on a monthly basis. And then there's something that happens at that property. So I'm going to use a fire for an example because that's the type of loss that can devastate a property and a family, and that tenant will have to move out. Hopefully that tenant has renter's insurance, so they can go to their carrier, to their State Farm agent if they have State Farm renter's insurance, and take care of their needs of finding a place to live or getting some emergency funds to go stay somewhere. But then you, as that property owner, you're not going to be able to collect rent from that tenant while they're not living there, and they have those other issues to deal with. And so this loss of rental income really comes into play at that point, and will provide the fair rental value for that property, so that you can continue to make, especially if you are using part of that rental income to pay the mortgage on that property, you can continue to make your mortgage payments and meet your expenses. Hopefully that helped answer that question.
Yeah, awesome. So the next question, if a covered loss damages a tenant's stuff, is that not covered under liability damages?
No, for liability to really come into play, you have to have done something to be at fault for that. And if the tenant has a theft there, their things are stolen, it's really just not going to come into play. They really do need to have their own coverage to protect them. That's the best solution for a tenant.
Awesome. All right, the next question's from Scott. We have, what features should we look for in tenants' renter insurance?
So if you're a tenant and you're looking for renter's insurance, I guess some of the things that I would look for if I was in that situation are very similar to the rental dwelling policy as a landlord. How do I want to reach out to my insurance company? What is the cost of that product? Renters can get quotes online very easily, not so much rental unit owners, but the renters can. But that cost is only a piece of the puzzle, right? So it's also, how are you going to deal with a claim if a claim occurs? What's the company like to deal with from that perspective? How financially secure are they to be able to respond to your individual claims when those occur? And Heather might have more to add to that.
Yeah, you know, another thing that homeowners as well as renters sometimes forget is the importance of knowing how much stuff they have. We accumulate and have a lot of things, and having a home inventory will help you to understand what the value of your things, what is covered. And when you go and talk to your insurance agent about rental coverage, knowing what things you have, what things you may be getting, play into that rental coverage as well. The worst thing that you want to do is have great, you know, electronic equipment and artwork and things like that, and find out after something has happened that because you hadn't had that discussion about the things that you have, that it may not be adequately covered. Again, that has to be a part of the conversation that you have with your agent.
That's a great point, Heather.
Awesome. So this next question, is there a distinction between having an umbrella policy that is specific to my rental property, or does a single umbrella policy cover my rental unit and other liabilities?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and for State Farm, it kind of, again, it depends. That's an answer I seem to be giving often. So if you're a homeowner and you have cars and you need an umbrella policy and you have a rental property, and I believe it's up to 4, that can all be covered under your under your personal lines umbrella policy. But if you're the type of rental property owner that has more than 4 properties, that's really not going to be what you need to meet your needs. You really need to move more into the business side of our policies and look for the commercial umbrella policy to cover those additional rentals. And then you would move them all over to that property and that policy instead.
Great. And do they have to visit a State Farm agent to get a quote, or can they do that online?
For a rental dwelling policy itself, you can't do that yet online. But you can call. You don't have to go visit in person. You can call, talk to an agent, talk to their licensed staff. They'd be happy to help you out with a quote.
Awesome. And can you explain more about pet issues? We have somebody in the audience whose policy won't cover their pet damage, but they can collect from their policy if their pet damages the property. They want to understand more about how they're covered with that.
Well, that's an interesting question. So from a rental dwelling, so from a landlord perspective, I don't know if they're coming at it from that angle or from the tenant who's there.
Probably from the landlord.
The landlord perspective. So if I guess if you take your dog, this would be a really interesting claim question to handle. So I'll take like a little stab at it, but say, if this is really your scenario, you need to talk to somebody like your agent or something like that. But let's say you take your dog over to go visit the property, and your dog and the furniture in the home is owned by that tenant, and your dog tears up their furniture while you're there doing some work, or then I think there would be some, at least you might likely have some liability coverage that would occur because you took your dog over and you're responsible for your dog's actions. Just like I, as a homeowner, I'm responsible for my dog's actions when I'm taking them out and about if they destroy property.
And I think that the important also aspect of that is whether it is as a renter having your pet in the home and possibly destroying things, or not being responsible. It is the tenant's responsibility, not the landlord's responsibility, to maintain that animal. You have to be and reinforce, if you're a property owner, reinforce with your tenants that if you do allow them to have pets, they must be responsible. Tying your dog up, in the back, letting your dog run loose or terrorize other tenants, destroying property, that is not responsible pet ownership. Most people that do have pets love their pets as if they're family, and they're more than happy to be responsible. But if you need information about responsible pet ownership or reinforcing that, Rentalutions and State Farm have partnered together to provide some of those tips on their blog that you can find. You can also go on to statefarm.com and see some great simple insight stories about that. But reinforcing responsible pet ownership. You as landlords, many of you have pets and you know how important they are to people, but you also have to protect the property that you maintain. So any of those tools are available through Rentalutions or through State Farm.
Awesome. Is there a difference in my insurance needs if I own the rental property as an individual versus if it's held in an LLC?
Other different companies might handle this a little bit differently. But at State Farm, you could still have your property owned in the name of an LLC and have that covered under our rental blind policy. We would just have the named insured would be that entity versus your personal name.
Got it. That makes sense. And besides costs, what kind of things should landlords consider when they're comparing policies from different insurance companies?
I think it gets back, Heather, to the same conversation we had with the renters when they're trying to decide who should I go with for my insurance. It's cost, but it's also servicing and other things.
Yeah, you look at your situation and your needs. If you have rental property and it's across the country, maybe you live on the West Coast and it's on the East Coast. Obviously, it's not going to be as easy for you to walk into your State Farm agent's office in that area, but if you can call and you're comfortable talking over the phone with staff and with questions, wonderful. 18,000 State Farm agents across the country are there to help service you, whether it is in a small community or large community. Likewise, for some people, pricing is important. And we recognize that there are going to be price differences. Sometimes we're higher, sometimes we're lower, but you have to look at what your individual needs are and how we can help meet those. The great thing about State Farm, though, is we've got 18,000 choices for you.
Awesome. So I think we have just one last question here. We have somebody in the audience who's considering buying a rental property, and they want to know what's the right time to purchase their insurance policy.
That's a great question. I think you'd want to start with having that in place by the time you're getting ready to close your escrow. So just like when you're buying a home, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to buy your home and then go, oh, I need to have insurance on that home. Mm-hmm. So you'll want to do that so you time that so that your policy is starting the same day that your escrow is closing and you take ownership of that property. So you want to start a little bit ahead, not wait till the day before. Mm-hmm. That might be a little bit stressful.
Yeah. Good advice. Awesome. So I think that wraps up our time for the Q&A. If we didn't have time to answer your question, we'll follow up with you in the days to come. And we're also going to be sending out a recording of this webinar also in the days to come. So we want to quickly thank everyone for participating, and a big thank you to Sherry and Heather for their time and their expertise. We really appreciate them being here with us today. So thank you again.